Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 103 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host today, Andy Whiteside. I got Chris Feeney with me. Chris, how's things going?
It's going well, man. It has been a fast start to the year, and I'm excited about um, just getting back and talking through all things IGEL again. So look forward to our conversation today.
So I know we're going to talk about endpoint strategy with IGEL, and that's probably the most top of mind thing for you. But what other than the topic for today, what's the most active conversations you're having as it relates to IGEL these days?
Great question. So there's been a lot of talk, which we'll speak about on zero trust as multiple industries, government is got a mandate to get to that. So and then you see this bleed over into areas like healthcare or retail. I mean, really kind of any industry, manufacturing, critical industries. Along with that, there's been a great set of conversations around the business continuity offering that we've put out there. We've got some exciting things that we've, first of all, announced at Now and Next back in Miami. And then we can talk about these in upcoming podcasts. But we last week launched the first piece of that in the IGEL Managed Hypervisor. And then we've got our dual boot one that's coming scheduled before the end of this month. Hopefully that happens before Labor Day. We're currently on target, but we got a lot of exciting things happening there, and it's just bleeding into additional use cases. And so between running us in production from a zero trust perspective, or okay, if something happens, I can switch over in a DR scenario. That we've got a lot of things happening in terms of that today. So, um, and it's opening up more and more use cases as we start talking to customers. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I see customers coming with IGEL use cases more and more, which has to be exciting for you guys.
yeah, very much so.
So
Um,
the blog for today, rethinking endpoint strategy with IGEL. I think that's kind of going to touch on what we were just discussing a little bit by James Millington, and this is from June 12th of this year, 2025. I'm just going to read the little intro here. For decades, endpoint strategies have been built on the assumption that compromise is inevitable, layering tools, endless agents, and sprawling recovery workflows have centered around designing for compromised failover, monitor, detect, remediate, a simple phrase that dramatically um, belies the reality of that process. By the way, IGEL believes it's time to break that cycle. Chris, is this all coming back to the idea that Windows is amazing and powerful, but there's problems with it?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, this is about a month ago or so, which last week, a week or two ago, was the 1 year anniversary of, a major incident that occurred, that realized how vulnerable, even in a protected scenario, that these devices can be. IGEL's been around for, 20 plus years, built on the idea that you can run in an untrusted environment, because of our approach. And so just kind of contrasting with, this multiple layers of protection for an operating system that's been out there for, 30 plus years. And there's what's interesting is Microsoft now announced a feature to remove some of the bloat, meaning some of the things like Xbox or whatever. And like, and so our approach has always been, I like to say, why even start with bloat at all? And so it just getting people to rethink this whole idea with regard to endpoint strategy. And I think what I love about it is in many meetings and conversations I've had with you is you walk in and you one of the first things you bring up is what's your endpoint strategy, and very often you get blank stares.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, so the endpoint strategy is typically the same more or less as it was 20, 30 years ago. Nothing's changed. And I agree with what James is talking about. By the way, the word belies is to give a false sense or not reality uh,
right?
of the process, by the way. Um,
Yeah,
so look, we have just been status quo-ish. We've got better tools and they're more real time than ever. But throwing Windows on endpoint and saying that's your digital workspace has just been the answer for, well, gosh, 40 years now. Um, and for customers that are in the enterprise or not even the enterprise, but in the work world, they don't have to function this way. There are alternatives that are very functional and practical and end user friendly, and IGEL is one of the answers there. James has a little video, not a video, but a little cartoon here. It says it's got a dog standing next to a coffee cup or sitting next to a coffee cup with says monitor, detect, remediate, and he's surrounded by flames and just sitting there. And the caption says this is fine. It's not fine, and it's just a matter of time before it bites us all again. In fact, it's biting people all the time, every day, whether they realize it or not.
100%. I mean, this is a famous, I mean, many people have already seen this cartoon before. The house is burning down and you're drinking coffee like everything's okay. And this is essentially the world we've lived in for many decades at this point. And so people often ask, well, what's your biggest competitor? Um, what's interesting because Microsoft is actually quite a good partner of ours, but I always say it's the status quo. This is always the way we've done it. And, even back to our former CEO, Jed, I mean, the whole idea of disrupting that, disrupting EUC, we had that as a tag for a while, and it's still relevant. Getting people to realize that there is a shift occurring as we've talked about that sort of at the end of the day, why do I need a Windows OS? It's mainly because the applications that have been written for that and many of those becoming webified, available through other means, primarily a browser, kind of uncoupling from the necessary need of a Windows OS. Now that we call it the long tail of Windows. There's a lot of apps that will be that way for a while, especially if they started on-prem. But anything cloud-based, from the get-go can often be done. Everything is done via browser, and that gives you a lot of options. So that kind of leads into sort of where we're going in this particular blog later down in the write-up here.
So the statement after the cartoon is this needs to be the error of designing for a failsafe. And I'll add to that, designing for a fail-safe, but still focusing on end user experience and security, which would be part of both of those, part of the fail-safe. But it doesn't have to be Windows on the endpoint. And like you said, Microsoft is a big partner of IGEL these days because I think they realize more than ever that solving that problem in a delivered format versus a deployed format is the enterprise way to handle it.
Absolutely. And then at scale too. I mean, even you look at some of the stuff that came out during that incident, you know, Scott Manchester, who runs that AVD and Cloud PC practice there, Microsoft, he touted several times the ability to rapidly recover because you had options in the cloud for your Windows desktops, whether it was a rapid restore of a snapshot or whatever. IGEL on the endpoint, not having been compromised at all, still up and running, you know, it can easily get you to that. Or if you happen to have a device that does go down, you can switch out with our UD Pocket, for example, and boot to that environment. So, but that being said, we kind of look at it as like, hey, why design from the get-go knowing you've got a patch and put all this stuff on it? Just start with a foundation that's already designed from a high security perspective to prevent a lot of that from the get-go.
Yeah. We're having all these conversations, and this doesn't address the fact that the future is probably a browser is the operating system of the future, and the application being delivered as a web app or a web native app is probably the future of a lot of this. It's going to happen where you're going to mitigate the need for Windows either as the delivered solution or as the endpoint solution. That day's coming. It's just we're in this murky middle for now and maybe for a very long time, and we got to figure out how to address it. And that's what IGEL is doing. This blog This blog it's part of a series. First one is preventive security model, which is what we're going to talk about today. Second one is preventive security architecture, which we'll talk about next time. And then the third one is adaptive secure desktop. It kind of goes back to my mantra of, in IT, we do one thing, and that is we provide access to applications, no matter how they're architected, to users with a good user experience and securely. And this whole blog series is going to talk about the secure aspect of how we do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this one is a preventive security model. It's got the one of the IGEL wheels that covers a bunch of different topics. It all centers back into the IGEL world. Chris, can you kind of walk through the preventive security model of IGEL and the graphic that's on here to help us understand how IGEL accomplishes this?
Yeah, so the model is we call it, let's say, this unifying framework, right? And so by that, Klaus, our CEO, kind of talked about like the three ring circus. So IGEL being in the middle, and if you're at a circus, you've got acts going on around, and the three ring circus is really focusing on you're unifying the application access, the hardware strategy, and of course your security. So if we take, at the very top, the endpoint hardware platforms, obviously IGEL can repurpose existing devices, so extend the life of those by, could be a number of years. And or you are looking for a net new user experience. Maybe it's partners with Lenovo, LG, HP, for example, or others where they have a specific model that fits your needs, whether it's an all-in-one, a laptop, or an actual thin client form factor, whatever. And so IGEL gives you that ability to be able to unify those. Even if you don't have a solid endpoint strategy in terms of a vendor, you could take different types of devices that are out there, convert them over, and now you have a base operating system and a management system that can control all of those types of devices. Now that leads over to obviously applications, right? What are you getting them to? Is it a virtual desktop? Is it a DAS offering? Is it just an enterprise browser or PWA or something? And so that's where you can kind of begin unifying that application delivery. You have some scenarios where you might need a full desktop Windows to do some work, and then others you might be able to just work out of a browser all day long, whether it's maybe a call center scenario, you just need a headset, a browser, and then, of course, on the security side, you kind of lean over there. Now you look at, the trust and the access there, unifying your identity access management. For example, maybe, hey, you want to integrate with your Intra, your Okta, maybe it's Ping or the Horizon and Omnissa with Workspace One, variety of, just, hey, and then you got security around there, or you want to have maybe a tool. We are working with Zscaler, for example, and they've got their client connector where you can, authenticate to that. Or now we just launched, I believe, the Palo Alto secure browser. We've also got the Island browser. And so there's multiple options there that align some of that security strategy, whether it's internal to the network or when I'm traveling remotely, and obviously pulls together what you're trying to do at the end of the day is keep those devices operational and protected from the ransomware or cyber attacks that might occur. So that's sort of what the preventive security model is kind of unifying all those strategies. And then around that and the outside of that circle are various types of projects that we've found ourselves part of these days. Windows 11 migration, upgrading, that's been a big one. Obviously, a lot of devices that can't go, maybe can't go to Windows 11 for different reasons on the hardware. We can help IGELize those, and then you can deliver that through another means. Business continuity, disaster recovery. We talked a little bit about that with some of the options we offer there. Mergers, acquisitions. I know you probably, as long as you've been around, probably had customers where something like that occurred and you're kind of unifying those companies together. Or they've got contractors that need to access corporate resources. And then, of course, you've got the manageability, or you've got sustainability efforts. You're trying to check some boxes off with a green initiative, whatever. There's a lot of these things that are happening. And then, of course, finally, total cost of ownership optimization. That's probably the bigger one. So that, in a nutshell, kind of pieces together what we call the preventative security model.
Yeah. And Chris, all this kind of leads back to the functionality being just as good or better in a world where we're in a connected world where this endpoint device that has the preventive security model can access what it needs to, and it's a real-time fast experience and secure at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And so what's interesting is we've actually internally began to deploy basically deploying IGEL corporate wide. And so we've done some analysis internally of all of our use cases. And so we'll have options for virtual desktop, whether it's Azure, VD, or Cloud PC, for example.
Yeah.
Obviously, a corporate browser. So we'll have some options there. And then for those that might need what we just launched, the IGEL Managed Hypervisor, a virtual Windows 11, for example, that's corporate Intuned and everything, but you can run it locally if your endpoint can support it, for example, hardware-wise, which most of them that they issue can. So we kind of have all those options available. And so we're going to be running this full time. So we're transitioning over to that right now. There's a portion of the company that are doing it. We're now, just so you know, we're over. I think we just went over 500 people globally. I don't know what the number is, so we're growing rather quickly. So
Yeah. All as a company over 500 people.
that's my understanding. Yeah. So
So
it's
Chris, my last comment was about the endpoint has shifted so much our strategy. Enterprise computing has moved workloads, have left the endpoint, SaaS, DAS, and enterprise browsers and VDI. I threw that one in there. Now carry the weight of productivity. Users roam, devices are fluid, data must stay protected without relying on where it is physically lives. That goes back to my previous comment. I mean, it was one thing when things needed to be client server applications and the client did its execution, but the data and things came from the back end, or the entire data was encapsulated within the client. In enterprise computing and in work computing these days, most of the time that's not the case. And when it is, it can be virtualized through some, desktop or app publishing solution. There's one, two, three, four bullets here where IGEL is talking through how the preventative security model provides framework that connects to these things. Can you walk through those?
yeah. So on the application front, that's a great point. I'm just thinking about it, right? So we've been tethered to data on the endpoint, and getting used to, and I think for the younger generation, I would say, for folks like us or Gen X or whatever, we're kind of used to this idea where everything, is sort of local. And that was a model that we went to. We kind of pushed it away from the AS400s to the end. We got our own personal computer. Along comes this new digital internet connected world, and that data doesn't have to be there on the endpoint. And so I mean, I'm sitting here looking at my desk, right? I've got my main laptop, I've got an iPad, an iPhone, I've got another IGEL laptop here, and I could use any one of them to work, and I won't lose productivity. I can get up, go run an errand, take a Zoom call, Teams call, email, and my data is still there. I could even attach stuff or send links or whatever, all just from my phone or my iPad or something, and I won't lose that because I don't have my Windows laptop. That's the world that we live in today. And so when you extrapolate that to like, all right, well, if the data is not needed on the endpoint, and certainly for security reasons, is a great reason why you don't want to have it on the endpoint, um, then it just sort of gives you more flexibility. Well, how do I deliver this to the user? I remember a couple years ago, I think your kickoffs, hard to believe it's probably 2, 3 years ago, but your kickoff was in Nashville, and I said, I'm going to deliver this presentation from the browser. That's it. And so I fired up my LG Gram and connected to your Teams call and just pulled up a browser with PowerPoint and delivered it. It worked fine. It was totally fine. So and user experience didn't suffer. The slides, worked just as if it was PowerPoint on Windows. So I think there's been a multiple angle here, right? And then of course, um, the rise of progressive web apps. That's a new one, right? Where, I just get an icon, it looks like an app, and it's really just in our case, like a Chromium-based browser that gives you I was looking at an article yesterday, if I want to look up Google Maps, which is, I use that quite frequently, especially if I'm
Yeah.
traveling or something, want to see what's going on around me or looking. That could be a progressive web app on the endpoint, but there's no data there
Yeah.
for the user. So,
So that's a progressive web app is like a browser-based delivered app, but it looks and feels native to the endpoint.
exactly. And it's, man, you look at an icon, you launch it, it looks like it's a locally built app and it's just running off a web framework. Um, so IGEL gives you all this flexibility. So right before this call, I was on a call with a customer and we were discussing sort of their production and healthcare strategy, and then what would happen if they need to switch to their DR site. And the phase one was just let's bring up an island browser, for example, which I know you guys use internally, and then switch over to an AVD once they kind of got through the outage or whatever, or make it flexible. They could do that if they need to, all still running IGEL. And so it gives them that flexibility. So they could take, if there is a device that has to run Windows for some reason, they could switch it to IGEL, migrate over, have access for a period of time, and then maybe switch it over to actual production, true productivity. Um, let's see, the other bullet points in your zero trust strategy, we talked about that. I mean, the mantra there is, I mean, unlike, Reagan kind of said it, trust but verify. Zero trust is no trust, always verify. And so you're in this model where, it's not a product, and there's no one product that gives you all of what this architecture is about. But there are certain sort of pillars that kind of fall into various categories, whether it's on the endpoint or user level, or data level, that type of thing. And so it covers. Sorry, go ahead. You have a question?
Well, I was going to comment in the paragraph here. It says, it's not one product. Trust isn't a product. It's zero trust is from you don't buy zero trust from a single company. But I will argue that when you start with something secure like iGel, you are starting from a point of zero trust and limited attack vector.
Right. 100%. That's we preach about that a lot because a lot of the stuff that's built around this model was for the status quo world when it comes to endpoints. And we talked about that earlier. There's a lot of products that were built to protect and provide some of these capabilities. And when we find ourselves going into conversations where we begin to kind of place ourselves on the endpoint, they naturally bring up a mapping to a zero trust requirement or whatever. And they realize that, wow, IGEL kind of eliminates these things already because of our architecture, the model that we've built from the ground up. And then you kind of layer in your, as I mentioned earlier, okay, well, can I layer in an identity access management platform? Sure, you can set up an IGEL device so you log in to get to the IGEL desktop as your identity, whether it's your corporate user account or Active Directory or your MFA, you have that option. If all you're doing is logging into a browser, you can make Island, for example, or Edge or something, so it points to an IDP. You authenticate again to get to your stuff. Here at IGEL, if I go to office.com, I'm always going to have to go MFA. If I go to my AVD or Cloud PC, I'm always going to go through that process every single time, regardless of where I'm coming from. So it never sort of gives me flexibility there, and that's fine. I mean, that's the conditional access piece that they've put in place. If I do travel to a country that is not my regular, then yeah, I have to either request an access thing. So hey, I'm in a conference somewhere in the world or whatever, and IT has to be made aware of it, so they will grant me that condition. So we have those things in place. And then the last two, I know near and dear to you, is the sustainability of IT equipment, right? Extending those life, refreshing devices, and giving them more time, right? I mean, I see that in a number of things, right? I went to buy some new shoes, right? I'm a runner, and before I left, there's a place where you can donate your old shoes if they're still in good working order or something. And so there's this concept, to continue to give some life to that, And so in IT, it's staggering. If you go to the dump to throw things away, the electronics section, just amazing how much stuff you see there
Yeah.
that's probably still usable, frankly, that just gets tossed and recycled somehow, some way.
Yeah.
Um, so, and then finally, the operational flexibility.
I
Um,
think, Chris, what you just said is interesting
yeah,
because it's not that it's reused. The hardware is reusable, at least components of it, if not all of it. It's just the industry has honestly created this motion that Microsoft and the PC makers have had for years, which is you always need something new and better and more powerful because the legacy model needed the power to execute. I think a lot of the electronics industry is that way, and PCs have been that way, and that's kind of the model you guys are breaking.
yeah. And you think about that now, you hear like I've been to several conferences in the last few months, and I look around who's there, what are they promoting? And we're seeing more of the AI PC stuff out there now with the NPUs, those new processors. And I think as I began to look into that, it was really like, all right, well, are there applications that are going to truly be able to take advantage of that? So again, just promoting the status quo and the endpoint, but yet a net new, hardware component, and so I think we're starting to see some of that, and we're just saying, hey, you might want to, give some thought to that. Now, there's arguments for maybe running those workloads on the endpoint, not in the cloud, and that's we're not going to debate that today, but again, we're just sort of the whole title is just rethinking your entire strategy. And what I like about working with you guys is that you go in there and you help them understand that, you know, end of the day, you're about delivering a digital workspace. Your endpoint has to be considered in that. And a lot of people seem to sometimes they forget about that. They don't really think about it from the beginning. So,
They either forget about it or they assume it's the end all be all, which is really what's happened all these years. It's been the digital workspace and the actual execution. The last bullet here is operational flexibility. You talked about mergers, acquisition, onboarding folks. That's where this really is a game changer.
so we were talking about this recently with a customer, right? If you have devices that are coming online in the network and they're able to communicate directly to UMS, our management system, um, you can do what's called a zero touch deployment. You know, you can push the IGEL OS components down to a Windows machine, convert it. It comes up, registers, and you never physically touch the machine, and you can get it all configured and switched over. You can also ship a device to a user and say simple instructions. You're going to boot it up. You're going to go through some clicks, get it on your home network or whatever. You're going to come to a screen, type in your corporate email address, and you're going to get walked through, and it's going to register. And then from there, you can configure. It gets configured and moved into essentially the right bucket, if you will, and that user's up and running in just a matter of minutes. Certainly during a M&A, if you take over an organization and the next day you want to switch them over to your corporate stuff, we can do that by converting the devices or the UD Pocket, plug it in, pre-configured or not. And now you're operating from the net new company environment, and then the old stuff is either taken care of down the road or whatever. So the point is you have flexibility and you can adapt based on that and don't have to worry about, things such as joining those devices to a domain and doing the trust. None of that really is needed if you want to put IGEL on the endpoint.
Chris, the next section talks about being the force multiplier for the preventive security model across the different partners you guys have in the segment. Can we talk through these four different pieces here?
Yeah, kind of. That's a great point. So I mentioned earlier about our partners in the hardware sector, right? IGEL doesn't build hardware anymore. We just focus on the software, and so we've got leading OEMs out there that have amazing hardware. In my purview here, I've got Dell, although not one of our official partners, but I've got a Dell device I've repurposed. I've got HP, I've got Lenovo, I've got LG, a variety of different platforms, all can run and have been checked off the list to run the IGEL OS. And then we've got a longer list that beyond the ones that have gone through official testing or whatever, there's a large number of devices out there that are x86, 64-bit compatible, and we can repurpose those just as easily. And then sort of bleeding into, okay, well, now I've established OS on the endpoint of choice or choices. Now any corporate user is going to be tied to some kind of identity. And so we've got strong partnerships with one I've mentioned before, whether it's Intra, Omnissa, One, Workspace One, Imprivata, Okta, Ping, all providing integrated SSO and MFA functionality. And so that delivers, various types of integrations with those, whether everything is like for Microsoft, for example, we have the Intune app. So you could take an IGEL device, put the Intune app on it, register it officially with your Intune instance. That doesn't mean you're replacing UMS to manage it. It just means, hey, that device is now a known entity. And when I go to access Edge or AVD or whatever, I know that that device is known and trusted, and then the user is able to authenticate. So it's just another layer. On the security side, we announced a lot of this starting, I think, late last year, but um, we've got customers where they use like the Zscaler. They just take a browser and go through the Zscaler portal, I'll call it that. And so there's no Zscaler client connector running, but we are working with Zscaler now to build that for their, I'm going to get it wrong, their private internet access or PIA, and then there's another one too. But again, all of that is based on identity. So the layer above that, you identify yourself, and then Zscaler can route traffic or give you access to resources based on your identity. Palo Alto, we just released the Prism browser. I think it's available in the IGEL app portal now. Secure browser, very similar to Island. And then partner with companies like Netscope for enforcement with secure service edge, SASE type stuff. And so these are where things are going. And then of course you have a lot of stuff you plug into the device or need to use the peripheral support, whether it's headsets, video, webcams across all these different industries, speech mics, smart cards. Document scanners, signature pads. I mean, all the stuff that you would use whenever I walk into some office, dental office, retail, whatever. I look at what's plugged in, and those common devices are what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So we kind of help weave all of that together with our partnership, whether it's a actual technical integration, there's an app or something that's weaving it together, or if it's more of a better together story. A good example of that would be Nerdio. We don't have a technical integration, but they save money managing your costs in Azure. We save you a ton of money on the endpoint management costs and operational pieces.
Right. Yeah, it goes back to the idea that it's all got to come together. If we're going to replace this beautiful, magical Windows endpoint workload and replace it with a delivered Windows or delivered application scenario, we've got to have our lessened attack vector together, which IGEL does out of the gate. But all this other stuff, the pieces of the community have to come together and still work. And you guys have done a great job onboarding partners to do that.
Yeah, my role now in vertical solutions, I'm looking at it at where all these things come together across the different verticals we sell into. So, we have solid delivery solutions in healthcare, retail, for example, financial services, um, with some options, right, depending on what the customer's back end might be or whatever. And so, but at the end of the day, we talk about it. It has to be a great user experience, and users need to accept that, and then obviously be able to be productive. And so, but it has to start with the foundation. So we always lead with security as the baseline, and then build on top of that the management capabilities, the partnerships, and then of course leading to what is the outcome. Well, the outcome might be a business continuity scenario, a fast recovery scenario. M&A acceleration, we talked about that. Windows 11 readiness, shifting to Windows in the cloud, the
Yeah.
sustainability, and of course the zero trust piece, um, piecing all those things together. And so the point we're making here is that IGEL as your endpoint strategy from the get-go can help you with all of these different areas across multiple different industries.
Yeah, Chris, it's been interesting to me to watch. We just picked up a client with about 25 users. They're part of a much larger enterprise company, but they're completely hands off and managed by themselves. And they deliver for the entire company 25 virtual desktops, all persistent, to IGEL endpoints. And it's been interesting to watch a small company with enterprise needs attack this and do it successfully with a delivered compute model and a very much secure but in user-enabled endpoint like IGEL. It's been interesting to watch them accomplish this without the scalable needs that some of the larger companies we deal with work that have.
That's very important. We haven't really talked too much about it, but briefly, um, we have seen customers by switching to IGEL on the endpoint. Now the operational cost, well, how many people does it take to manage these devices? Do I need, 50 people, to manage 50,000 endpoints or what? And so we know we've got customers out there where it's maybe 1 to 2 people managing tens of thousands of devices. You can get to that type of scale and then free up some of those other staff for other type of more strategic projects, but you're not manning, providing a lot of manpower to manage these devices once you get them set up and configured. And then obviously partners like yourself that can provide that capability, delivering on projects or in the MSP world, managing it at the end of the day for the customer, soup to nuts.
Yeah. Chris, I think we've wrapped it up here for this part. I'll read one James's last bullets here, last paragraphs, where traditional endpoint stacks are active and bloated, or reactive and bloated. PSM is lightweight, adaptive, and policy aligned, a fail-safe foundation for cloud-first enterprises. Um, I'm going to change that last piece, cloud first companies, right? Because the enterprise word gets used a lot to talk about the big boys. And like I was just pointing out, small customer of ours, 25 users, is doing this type of solution. And it's truly enabled them to have a smaller, lightweight staff. Mergers and acquisitions can happen. They can grow. They're secure by design. Really an enterprise class solution for companies of all sizes.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
Next up in this series is preventative security architecture. We'll try to get this one done in the next week or two and get it out and cover what James covers in that one and get this content in front of our listeners.
Well, always a pleasure, Andy. Appreciate it.
Yep. Chris, thanks for the time today. And I guess it's Tuesday, so hopefully you got a rest of the week you can get some stuff done and try to have some fun at the same time.
Always will try.
Yeah.
Take care, man. Thank you.
All right. Talk again later. Thank you.